Good afternoon, Peekskill. Welcome to What's Going On in Peekskill. Today we have a guest, a digital dancer, Chloe Warham Gordon. She's got some important information she wants to share with us. So I'm going to ask you to listen very carefully with an open mind. So I'm going to turn it over to Chloe. She's going to introduce herself and what she does, the things here in Peekskill with her digital creation. And Chloe, welcome.
Oh, welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Lee. You're such a pillar of the community, and you've done so much. So I really appreciate you giving me this platform to be heard in a way. Because I've been, for the past year, actually over a year, I've been raising alarm about the dismal state of marketing in Peekskill, starting first with the Chamber, which prompted them to put out a new bid for marketers, and then expanding to the bid, which prompted them to create a subdivision of their board to evaluate the social media needs of the bid. And then it now has expanded into the city, and where it's become a little bit more dramatic. But circling back and rewinding a bit, I used to be a professional dancer, and I moved to Peekskill over 5 years ago. It's actually now the longest I've ever lived in a single residence. I really consider it my home because it changed my life. I was introduced to this woman, the sister of Deputy Mayor Pat Riley. She asked if I could help her with her social media along with her acting partner. I said sure, and all of a sudden they become platinum influencers. The content I was editing and posting for them went viral, and now they have over 1.4 million followers across all platforms. And from there, other folks were like, can you help us? And I was creating other influencers. I've created over 1,000 organically viral videos with over 50,000 views. My most watched video that I posted has gotten 20 million views. So, I started picking up clients locally downtown. People would hear about what I do, and they're like, oh, can you help us? And therefore, out of my 40 clients, or around 40 clients, a dozen are in downtown Peekskill. And I also live downtown, so I have to occasionally collaborate with the city and the city-affiliated accounts when it comes to things like the Juneteenth parade, or to promote a benefit the client is having that is community-oriented. And what's currently occurring is I have some clients who are just surviving solely based on e-commerce income from their social media accounts. So I've integrated their e-commerce sites and services with their Instagram and TikTok, like TikTok shops, Instagram shops, Facebook shops, etc. Because they don't have enough pedestrian foot traffic, that's what's keeping them alive, in addition to influencer sponsorship deals, subscription fees, etc., creator fund rewards. So I've really been trying to raise the alarm bell for Peekskill to do a better job to promote itself. And it really reached a tipping point, of all things, when Bethany Frankel came into town, and I saw just the impact a simple video had. And I thought to myself, because 1,000 reservations were made at John Sharp's Birdsall after her positive review of the place. So I was like, well, if only we had a strategic, coordinated strategy to have this happen more often, it wouldn't be like on certain days when my brick and mortar company clients downtown only sell $11 in goods because of the lack of pedestrian foot traffic. I wouldn't have to worry about that. I wouldn't have to worry about being the only thing that keeps them afloat. And now they're also debating, well, if we're just surviving off of online sales and our shop's essentially a storage place, why should we keep it open? It's expensive. So that was kind of the genesis of me starting to ask some questions and raise alarm and inquire, okay, what is the strategy, what's happening? And I was professionally dancing at the time of the DRI, and when the grants were distributed, my mother was actually following the local news a lot more closely than I was. I wasn't really involved at all. I didn't work in Peekskill at the time. I just kind of came back here to sleep, and that was pretty much it. And I learned that $500,000 from the $10 million DRI grant was to be delegated for marketing, with half of it going to this wayfinding company. It's kind of this obscure company in North Carolina, and nearly the other half going to this Westchester-based company, but that's not Peekskill-based. And I had heard rumblings from various clients and those within the business networking communities who were involved with this aspect of the DRI, and one of them was like, oh, I'm on this advisory, on project advisory committee / board for it. if you have any suggestions, your voice will definitely be heard. Don't worry about it. So I knew that, well, I had a sense that this project had already begun. And as we were entering like January, February, I was like, well, what are they doing? Because I didn't see anything coming to fruition. Back in the early weeks of 2024, I started noticing that really nothing was happening, but I did notice that the city created an Instagram page. And I was like, oh, well, this is great. At least we can try to get that discoverability on Instagram. We can do collaborations with local influencers on Instagram, etc. We can hopefully try to increase our social media SEO so that we can better compete and steal some of that tourism traffic from Cold Spring, Beacon, etc. And then I started noticing the content, and it was, you know, just very low quality. And by low quality, I mean looking at the analytics, the engagement was low, the interactions were low, the reach was low, and therefore not many people knew that there was even an Instagram page for the city of Peekskill. So I actually encountered Matt Rudikoff and Matt Alexander at an event, and while I mentioned to Matt Rudikoff I have all these ideas about better promoting the city so that we can create a better digital presence and footprint, can I meet with you? And he said, well, you know, we already have a company that has a contract to do all that, but their contract's going to be up in a few months. So why don't you put in a bid yourself? And so I was weighing potentially doing that. I was thinking, well, I have a lot of ideas. I already have a lot of city connections. Perhaps that's something I could do, because it's one of those situations where you're like, if no one's doing it, perhaps you should just do it yourself. And as I mentioned earlier, I've really fallen in love with Peekskill. I've fallen in love with its culture and history, and I wanted to help in showcasing that and serve my community however I could. So I scheduled a meeting with them, but in between this time, before I met with them and after it was mentioned to me that the contract would end and I could have an opportunity to submit my proposal, I was at a client's event, and this woman, her name's Sharice Jervis-Hill, she approached me. She, in public, she got in my face, and she wasn't really yelling at me, but angrily and emphatically telling me that I really need to mind my own business, that what her work is doing and what the city's doing, the city's social media accounts and assets, has nothing to do with me, that I need to keep my opinion to myself, that if my clients are struggling with pedestrian foot traffic, I should invest in Facebook ads or something, as though my struggling small business and nonprofit clients have money for a Facebook ad budget to promote the entire city of Peekskill and downtown. But and I also, she had apparently heard from some folks that I was asking around about the status of this project. And she said, well, I'm just posting about fire hydrants, and if you have any issue, come to me directly. Don't go behind my back. I wouldn't do that to you. You're young. I run a 7-figure business. You're really ruining your reputation already. I've been recommending you to people, which I highly doubted. I highly doubt, yeah. But something that really stuck with her is that almost a year ago, actually over a year ago now, I had a consult with her when I first met her. She asked me if I could come and collect some footage at an event, because she runs an event planning agency and event organizing agency. And she asked, are you available on May 7th? And, you know, unfortunately I wasn't. And we had a Zoom meeting, and actually before she asked that question, I assumed it would be like a social media consult. So I prepare my free consults by conducting an audit of someone's accounts, and then I prepare to give them that audit with, you know, suggested objectives, strategies, tools, etc., and feedback. So I have this whole audit prepared. She enters the Zoom room, and she's on a conference call with another meeting on the phone while the Zoom camera and audio is on, which was a little, I guess, rude, but I was like, okay, she's a busy woman, I respect that. Then she finally got to me. She asked me if I was available May 7th of 2023, and I was like, no. And she's like, well then, okay, that's it. And I was like, oh, you don't want to hear what I prepared? And she's like, no, not really. And I said, well, what I was going to say, and I'll just briefly say this because it's the most important thing I found, but it's clear on your Events to Remember Instagram page, at least to me as a professional, that you purchased fake followers. So I estimated that 1,000 of her followers were real, and then perhaps 9,000 are fake. And if you actually scroll through her follower list, you'll start seeing all of these very suspicious accounts that have lacking content and are following like 7,000 people, and they themselves only have like 20 followers. It's pretty much the telltale signs of a fake following. In addition to, I noticed immediately that her engagement on her videos was like 200 impressions, maybe 1,000 at most. And the engagement was, and interaction rate was very low, 20 here, 12 there, 5 there. So it just didn't correlate with that number of followers. And yes, and then once I investigated the followers list, I found a lot of very suspicious bot accounts. And she goes, well, gotta go, bye. And she hung up the Zoom. So when we had this altercation back in April in person with her confronting me about kind of digging and considering putting in a bid myself or being critical of the social media accounts.
When you say critical, I mean, you were going to put in a bid for the very same job that she has now under the DRI contract? Is that what you're talking about?
And it's not for the exact same job. So the DRI contract only, so this is the contract that they were given. And I'll get more into it, but it's only a 12-month contract, and it utilizes state taxpayer funds. So this would have been, their whole point of this contract was to create the foundation, the baseline, so that another marketer could come in and grow upon it. So you want to create that original strategy, the social media brand toolkit and guidelines, everything. You want to start building that organic and inorganic reach, that following that you can galvanize. You want to have a strategy in place, and then someone else can take over. That's the goal of this grant. And so whoever would take over, I'm assuming they wouldn't have as big of a contract unless they got a private sponsor, which is actually a part of this timeline as well. But yeah, so she confronted me, and I said, well, you know what, I will send you my feedback, which related to how I felt like it was challenging to collaborate with the city. There wasn't a clear point person in terms of messaging. There wasn't someone to collect feedback about what business owners and residents wanted to see in regards to marketing. And so I sent all that to her, and I never heard back. And then I had my meeting with the Mats, and I was peppering them with questions because I knew this agency got $174,000. Well, at that time, I thought it was around $200,000. And so I estimated $200,000 divided by 12 is $16,000. So they must have at least $16,000 a month. That's a lot of money, and we're not seeing anything except for some municipal social media updates that really shouldn't cost the city more than $1,000 a month. So the math wasn't mathing for me. So I was asking them, is there an inorganic campaign? How many posts are they supposed to do? Is there a crisis management plan? What are the guidelines when it comes with to collaborating with local business owners? Who is in charge of doing the bid-related content, the GRI-related content, the Chamber of Commerce content? How do you designate, okay, this shouldn't be a city post, that should be a bid post, or that should be a Chamber of Commerce post? Like, where does that all come in? And they couldn't answer anything. And I learned at that time, and I had also heard rumors about this, that Charisse herself, without any marketing experience, sans, you know, really her own portfolio, which perhaps wasn't in authentic. And I'll add a disclaimer that all of this comes from the publicly available information combined with my personal professional opinion. I'm not trying to, you know, slander anyone or anything. But she was managing the accounts. And I thought that was a little odd. And then because I saw the main contractor is Weinreb and Connor. So why is she managing the city's municipal accounts? And then I also found out that Matt Alexander is managing them with her, along with Patrick in City Hall, who I guess works with Matt Alexander. And I was like, aren't you busy being city manager? And since when are you a marketing expert? Why are you managing the Instagram page? Do you even know the difference between like a reach and an impression?
This is the city manager managing the Instagram page?
Along with Charisse. And what Charisse has also been doing is she will source content from the community. So she'll take, for instance, a post I do, a photo I post on a certain page, and then she'll share it to the city page, and she won't credit me as the original creator and things like that. So there were just a lot of things didn't make sense. And then I was like, well, if I offered to do an audit for free as a volunteer of the contract and offer, my professional feedback, would that be okay? I'll put in a FOIL request. And they said, okay, that's fine. That's a good idea. We'd really appreciate your feedback. So I put in a FOIL request, and 2 days later, I got their contract. And that's when my personal hell started, because I've been dealing with whistleblower retaliation ever since. But,
But I want to talk about that. Since you've come out with this, do you feel that you've been retaliated against?
Oh, 100%, yeah. Because the reason I did this...
And do you know that there's a possibility that more will be coming down the line? Are you prepared for that?
Yes, because I want to fight for what's right. Folks were saying, hey, Chloe, just sit back. You can't win this. People are going to see it as you being self-interested, even though I added an addendum to my report that by writing this and submitting it, I agree not to submit a bid myself because I don't want to damage my standing as a community advocate.
Okay.
But once I saw this, you see, I thought I'd be making suggestions like, hey, expand to TikTok to reach Gen Z. I thought they were going to be really anodyne suggestions. But once I saw this, I felt sick to my stomach. And they're I've been through...
Talk to us about it.
I've been through a lot in life, as you know, like
yes.
My dad dying when I was young, housing insecurity, all that. There have been very few points in my life, though, where I felt sick to my stomach versus when I saw this.
The contract with the city.
Yeah.
And how much is that contract?
It's $174,000. Yes. And apparently I had to learn a lot about, and of course I didn't put in a bid in 2022 because I was dancing professionally. So I found out that Enormous Creative put in a bid, but they were denied because it had to go to a minority or woman-owned business. That was one of the rules. So it went to this wine rub and Connor that used to be based in Mount Kisco, but I believe are now based in White Plains. And they don't really have any direct connection to Peekskill other than I think Thomas has been involved with the Peekskill Film Festival. And they're very active in the local business networking communities, as is Charisse, and as is another subcontractor in here, Mike Dardano, who does the Hudson Valley Gateway Chamber of Commerce social media, as well as the Business Council of Westchester social media. Charisse herself, 3 years ago, took over the BIDS Farmers Market. So her team also runs the BIDS Farmers Market Facebook and Instagram page. So you have this situation where the subcontractors are already combined managing the other assets associated with promoting the city. So there's no diversity. And the thing that made me the most sick to my stomach, in addition to what I feel like are inflated compensation rates, like you could really tell, in my opinion, someone went in here and they're like, there's all this money, let me see how expensive and how much I can charge the city. But then when I saw they weren't even meeting the deliverables that they promised, I was horrified because I've grown to love this city. It's the first place I really feel like home. I feel like your family to me. Yes. A lot of folks, I'm really grateful, have become like my non-blood family, but my true like soul family in a way.
And we appreciate that. Can you share with us the deliverables that are not being delivered?
Yes. So, and it's funny. So my report is about 40 pages. Their contract overall is about 11, not including like the legal disclaimers and things like that on the top. But what really pissed me off is Peekskill, as you know, is in desperate need of this money. They need these resources. And the fact that they have taken it and done nothing it's enraging, and someone has to stand up for it because it's the right thing to do. So one of the things that struck out, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an expert in this, but this contract includes a severability clause, which makes it says, if any provision or part thereof of this agreement is judiciously declared invalid, void, or unenforceable, each and every provision or part thereof nevertheless shall continue in full force and effect. And the unenforceable provision shall be changed or interpreted so as to best accomplish the objectives and intent of such provision within the limits of applicable law. So it's very hard to sever. And what's
so we're stuck. We're basically stuck.
At least for 12 months, yeah. And then where it started November of 2023, that's when the contract period started. It ends November of 2024. And per their timeline, even though they haven't kept to it, June is when they're supposed to be planning contract renewal. and they're planning on seeking a private sponsor to pay for next year's contract renewal. So what I sense their plan is, and what I want to get ahead of, because I don't want them to be able to do this unchecked, because really what I want from the city is one thing. I want to demand more oversight and accountability. I want them to justify where they've been spending their hours, what have they met, why haven't they met most, like 90% of their deliverables. That's unacceptable for a contract this large. So, but in June of 2024, per their timeline, they're supposed to look for a private sponsor, and I anticipate their argument is going to be, well, we were just delayed because, it's the beginning of a project. Things happen. We just need more time. And now we have a private sponsor, maybe a developer or something, who's going to give us $200,000, and we won't need to take any taxpayer funds. We're in the clear, all good. And it's like, that's frightening, because that means there could be a shadow director of the city's accounts, and we have no control over it. Plus, why would you allow an agency to basically fall upwards? Why would you reward them with another year of this nonsense for not completing it? So, the main points of this project is they are supposed to be the new communication directors for the city of Peekskill. And a lot of this is very diversity, equity, inclusion focused. And because it had to go to a minority or woman-owned business, they put down Mary Connor as the president of Wine Rub and Connor, which is kind of fascinating because from my research into it, it seems like Wine Rub and Connor, Wine Rub, that partner, they were both males, and Wine Rub passed away, but Tom Connor, the male, is still here, and the agency appears to consist of him, his wife, and their adult son, so it's very nepotistic, and they have a D+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, but they are, Business Council of Westchester members, and if you don't know marketing, honestly, this looks it looks like it hits all the marks, even though they don't have any clear KPIs or key performance indicators and benchmarks, so they have no standards, so it's not like, our goal is to reach at least 5,000 people per month with a mixture of organic and paid advertising. There are no benchmarks like that. So they're also supposed to be devising a new brand for the city, which includes a new slogan and logo, also mentioning that it's a place of African American consequence, which is all great. They don't mention the Hispanic population at all in here. 46% of Peekskill is Hispanic.
I beg the different 51%, but,
Well, according to official records, it might be higher.
We're not counting the underground, the 7,000 underground, but we'll talk about that another time.
So the subcontractors are Sharice Jervis-Hill, who is considered the DEI officer. So her job, even though she has no HR experience, because I looked up, she's getting paid about $200 an hour. The standard for someone in that position is to have a human resource degree or DEI certificates or experience in that kind of human resource. Does she have either? She has neither, no.
And how was she appointed to this job?
Well,
just
she has a lot of connections. She's a woman of color and the political connections. Yes.
I'm sure it's the political connections.
So, and
is
then
one of those connections cousins?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and what is Miss Cousins' affiliation with this Connors and Weintraub? Anything?
Her name's not listed here, but so November is when it started. And according to my research, this was the only month where they actually kind of kept it per their timeline. They went off the rails after November. So in November, they did have a meeting with their project advisory committee. They have not met with them since. So and also their project advisory committee consists of a very close friend of the two subcontractors. And the other subcontractor, who is on this man, I think his name is like Michael Hernandez or something. He's from Manhattan, apparently, according to his LinkedIn. He's a Hispanic outreach expert, but they just mention him in the contract. They don't mention a thing that he does, and they don't use the word Hispanic at all in this contract. So I don't know where he is or what he does. But their project advisory committee is essentially the paid subcontractors plus their unpaid volunteer good friend. And according to what I've learned, they have not met since November, so there's been no oversight. And what's fascinating is I've been experiencing a lot of radio silence from the city since I submitted this, because I guess it inadvertently paints the city in a bad light. And when I took this on, I came from a good faith place of thinking, the city just did not understand what they were getting into. They didn't understand. They're not experts in marketing, and it was understandable. But their silence since has been
so you submitted this report to Matt Alexander in its entirety.
Yes,
and you met with him personally and gave him your concerns.
Before I wrote this, and now it's been a month, and they have not gotten back to me. But I'll get back into I know it'll take probably too long to go through this whole darn thing, but this is when it gets very upsetting. So the amount of money these folks are paid is insane. So even in November, when they actually kept to the contract, they were paid $13,600, mostly just for planning meetings. And they're also charging the city for their Hootsuite, $200 for that. But in addition to paying Miss Jervis Hill an estimated $4,000 a month for, I believe it's 20 hours of work, they're also charging agency fees. So for instance, they were supposed to charge, let's see, in the month of December, $11,000. B is $11,000. I'm not sure who that is. The too lazy didn't read version. Charisse is supposed to be the DEI officer. Her whole job is to be integrated within the community. Is she from Peekskill? No. Does she live in Peekskill? No, she lives in Cortland Manor. But her whole job is to make sure all voices feel heard, all feedback is being taken in, all the material is being ethically sourced, and she doesn't really have experience to do that. And instead of doing all that, she is doing the actual content creation and, well, at least content asset management work that Mike Dardano, who perhaps is a little overextended doing the Business Council of Westchester and the Hudson Valley Gateway Chamber of Commerce social media, is perhaps too busy to do. And I really like Mike a lot as a person. He's kind of the antithesis of Charisse in a way. He can really take feedback well, and I know he respects me, and it's through that respectful relationship that I've told him that his content is the most engaging, and he acknowledges that, and I'm proud of him. He's done a lot to improve his content as a result. So I wish he was actually doing his job, because that would make kind of my life a lot easier with calling this stuff out. But so they were already by now. So now we're entering the end of June. We're entering month 8, which is July. They've been paid over $100,000 of the $175,000. They were supposed to have come out with new brochures, a new logo, and allegedly the logo mock-up they came up with that they charged probably $1,500 for. Also, I have this whole report. We'll have to link the report so you guys can read the whole thing, and I'll link the contract too so you can see for yourself, because my brain gets a little Adderall-induced ADHD flustered. So, but they were supposed to, their logo mock-up allegedly was the Best Buy logo for Peekskill. So it was Peekskill, Best Buy lettering in blue, exclamation mark. So by February, they were also supposed to have come out with peekskill.com/discover, a new tourism website. If you go to that URL, it says error 404, link not found. February, they were also supposed to have casting interviews for spokespeople to appear in social media videos, and they were supposed to have already edited all those videos. They're supposed to put out up to 24, I believe it's reels. They don't really clarify. There's a lot of nebulous aspects to this contract. They've only put out one reel of the 24, and they're entering month 8. And it's fascinating because they also talk about the need to emphasize the history of Peekskill and do all this community outreach. And because Charisse isn't doing her job as the DEI officer, the Connors, who they aren't justifying their $11,000 agency fees per month, or their $3,000 filming production fees, or their $3,000 director-producer fees per month. Tom Connor is actually the one I hear who's calling people and asking for things, which Charisse is supposed to be doing. So the first thing in terms of oversight I want to know is, why are people not sticking to their roles? And if they're not sticking to their roles, is someone getting additional compensation or less? How is that working? Is the city compensating for these unmet deliverables? For instance, they were supposed to have already done a whole paid marketing schedule and a bunch of paid ads. So after the Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2016, Facebook was required to provide advanced page transparency. So if you go to a business Facebook page, like the City of Peekskill, and you go info, you'll see that they have never run a single ad. So out of the money they've already been paid, a significant amount is for ads. I want to know where that money is that hasn't been used yet. And the city and the Connors keep using the excuse of delays. And Sharice's role is also to listen to professional feedback, which is funny because, you know, I've gotten a lot of slack for going public with this, and it's because I've been privately behind the scenes kind of nudging the city and folks to do better with their marketing. Had Sharice back in April just gotten back to me and responded to my concerns and showed that she was receptive to responding to them, I would have never gone public with this. The reason I ultimately went public with this is because this whole thing is unacceptable to many degrees, and I want to know that the city is going to take them into account. Folks in our city are struggling. They got paid $40,000 in April, and they did virtually nothing except, because remember how I mentioned earlier, the major objective of this project is to create a new branding foundation for the City of Peekskill. What they had been doing for 10 years on Facebook was just sharing municipal updates and announcements and ribbon cutting photos, things like that. They've essentially just continued that strategy, and they've also just expanded it to Instagram. That's it. They've done nothing different. So why are they getting all this money if they haven't changed anything? They've just honestly created worser optics for the city because you have this individual who's supposed to be a community liaison with the city actively warring with a local business owner and resident who's a professional in the space. And when I published, I was looking for community feedback because my logic was, well, maybe the city's not responding to me because they think I'm self-interested, and if I got other folks to chime in, they'd see, okay, this is a larger issue. Small businesses are having to close and limit their hours because they don't get enough pedestrian foot traffic. So I did get, when I put out on the local Facebook groups, a link and a request for people to share their experience with Peekskill when it comes to marketing communications and their ideas. Folks did say, well, yes, I haven't seen any sort of tourism plan, etc. And that's when I didn't even mention Sharice. I just pointed out the basics, and I was honestly hoping that the community would help me because I felt so alone in this and almost gaslit in a way because folks I really respect, some people who really stand for being anti-corruption and for transparency. They've told me just to sit this one out. It's not worth the potential damage to my reputation. Sharice and the other folks are too interconnected with the business networking community. I'm going to ruin my business before I start. I'm just a young woman. There's no change I can enact. So they're trying to silence me. So I was hoping also that folks would see what was going on and begin kind of helping me process this in a way and helping me create a coalition to demand change. And to an extent, that's slowly happening. So I really appreciate the community because Sharice might be connected in the business networking groups, but I'm really connected with the people of Peekskill.
Absolutely.
And anywho, even though I didn't mention Sharice's name on the post, she being the DEI officer who's supposed to undergo and do social listening, she writes in threatening to sue me publicly, and I wasn't expecting that. I know privately she was telling people she was going to sue me, and they were conveying that to me in a advice and friendship sort of way. So I responded. I was like, well, that's very DEI officer of you. And I said, well, all I want is someone just to answer my questions. So my report starts with 100 questions. Starting with, these are some of the biggest issues that I need the contract to address. Who is overseeing the agency and subcontractors to ensure they are delegating their hours of work they have pledged in meeting deliverables? What is happening with the allocated funds for paid digital ads? And for when the paid media is finally run, what are the key targeted demographics? If the ads are not run by the end of the contract, will the agency have to return those sums for that effort to the city? Has there been a discussion on running a local survey, collecting feedback, marketing and branding response to what the city is doing? Apparently inflated rates for compensation, because, for instance, the Connors, I'm not really sure what they're doing, but they're getting paid at least like $7,000 a month and breaking it up between all three of them for an estimated, I calculated 2.5 hours of work per work week. So it's like $1,000 an hour almost. It's insane. And wow. I listened to an interview Tom Connor did, and he strikes me, he worked in television, and this whole contract, I have a lot of respect for folks who are from that marketing generation before me. I'm going to sound like such a zillennial saying this, but you can tell that he doesn't really know social media. Like for social media, you don't need to set up a whole green screen backdrop. There are green screen effects for that. You don't need to hire a city spokesperson. By, I think it was April, they were supposed to have an open call for dancers to do this whole big tourism video featuring dancers. They just don't understand how trends work. They don't understand how algorithms work. It's a very outdated approach to marketing, and it's upsetting because there's no mention of influencer collaborations. Like, unfortunately, if the draw is, even though they're not clear in their objectives, to get more Gen Z and younger millennials into town, you have to go where they're at, and they're, especially post-COVID, they're all on social media. They're on TikTok. 40% of Gen Z will go to TikTok before Google when looking up a local business and deciding if they want to be a patron at that. So what process would begin if the contractor is found to be delinquent in meeting their deliverables? They won't answer that question. What has happened with the unused video footage from their filming dates? So apparently, according to my clients, it's mostly Tom and Mary Connor, actually, who have come into Peekskill, usually complaining about the parking, which I don't blame them, and complaining about the distance from wherever they're based these days, and demanding that clients accommodate my clients. And they, of course, don't go through me, because it would, like, if I'm about to collaborate with someone for a social media project or something, or some sort of promotion, if they do have any sort of communications director or manager, I go to that person, because it's a respect thing, and they know that client, they know that business, they know what the brand tone is supposed to be, and what will get the most engagement and be the most efficient way of moving forward and showcasing that business or person. So the fact that they've gone to my clients without consulting me is already kind of a breach of like general norms. And my clients who they have filmed, apparently, like for instance, one wasn't available when they wanted to film. So they're like, okay, well, you won't be in the tourism video. And that was a few weeks ago, so she's like, okay, fine. She had them come in. They came in for 5 minutes. They got really terrible footage, apparently, and then they left. And that was a few weeks ago, a few months. If you go to the city's social media pages, I have yet to see anything that they've collected from all their filming. And they are charging these insane, like $3,000 separate producer-director and $3,000 filming production fees. Also, as I mentioned earlier, they're sourcing material from me and potentially other creators and not crediting us as they repost it, because the standard procedure is, say you find something you really like on Instagram and you want to put it on your feed, you'll say, oh, reposted from, or original post by, or credit to. They're not doing any of that. What is the portfolio and evidence of the involved parties' marketing qualifications and prowess? Because, yes, the Connors have a D+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have a history of working with like AT&T and Verizon, I believe. It's a lot of, corporations. It's not, I haven't been able to find really a good portfolio of, community assets and pages they've created, especially tourism sorts of pages. And Tom Connor in his interview was like, well, we're like, I'm going to paraphrase, we're too good for like this digital media. We don't have a digital presence ourselves on social media, because once you put it out there, it's on there forever. And I'm like, well, I'm one of those people where I'm so busy working on client stuff that my own social media pages are neglected, but still, like, they have shown no evidence of social media prowess, and perhaps like 60 or 70% of that contract is social media. So also, how do they plan on integrating with specific large groups within Peekskill, the NAACP seniors, nonprofits? The frequency of published content is unclear. Yeah, break down all the costs to me. What's the plan to make content more accessible for nearly half of Peekskill, which is Hispanic and predominantly bilingual or monolingual, well, speaking Spanish? There's been no outreach to the Hispanic community that I know of yet. What exactly is the content review process? Why haven't the Connors been using their Westchester connections to do something with like MTA Away or another intelligent collaboration? And if hiring a spokesperson, why not have an open call already since they're late? And how would you select someone uncontroversial? How would they be paid for their time? Most cities, like if you look at the city of Yonkers, they've done a great job kind of turning Mayor Spano into the unofficial spokesperson, and they'll oftentimes collaborate with his page, which is great because the thing about social media that's different than perhaps what they're used to in TV advertising is it's all about authenticity. When I tell people the secret behind a viral video is the 3 E's, it has to be engaging, empowering, and or educational. It has to be ultimately entertaining, empowering, or educational, ultimately engaging. So what they're doing is they are not really featuring what's amazing about the community. They're not going and doing like business features of the month or nonprofit features of the month or a community cause of the week or things like that. They're not showcasing our beautiful parks, our great amazing history. I mean, we had a Revolutionary War skirmish in town. The Creole crayon was invented here. They're not really doing anything to pull people in. Like if you were to go to the City of Peekskill social media as like a 20-something in Manhattan and you're thinking like, oh, well, where do I want to go? Do I want to go to Sleepy Hollow? Do I want to go to Beacon? Do I want to go to Cold Spring? And if you look at their City of Peekskill page, you'll see a lot of hydrant flushing feed posts, and you'll think we're a city of hydrant flushing. So anyway, it's just, and if one aims in reaching millennials, what have the outreach efforts been to Gen Z millennial marketers, branding experts, and residents? What's the plan for coordinating filming sessions with participants' current marketing infrastructure? What are the conflicts that the contractors or subcontractors might have? And were these reviewed before the bid was accepted, as well as, again, at the 6-month mark? I want them, according to the timeline, they were supposed to do a 6-month analysis, so a halfway point analysis. I want them to publish those findings. I suspect the assets are organically reaching, well under 100,000, probably like only 1,000 people on each platform. It's probably the same people who keep engaging with the post. I want them to put that out there. I want them to put out, if there's an updated timeline, I want them to define exactly who is doing what, because we, the people of Peekskill, have a right to say, I don't know if I want an event planner in charge of our marketing. Because, for instance, with me, I'm not going out there being like, oh, I am a social media manager. Let me try helping you organize your wedding. Like, I know my specialty and I know my lane. So,
okay.
So some of the other core questions that I asked, is there going to be a plan of any sort of e-commerce integration, like selling city-themed merch with Instagram and Facebook? Is the city working on having their official pages verified so folks know that that's the official page? Because if you look up, and you should do this too, whoever's watching this, if you look up Instagram on TikTok, if you look up Peekskill on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, especially on Instagram and TikTok, you'll see mostly posts from my clients that have gotten 100,000 plus views and thousands of interactions, saves, and shares, because the secret behind a viral video is just to have a high retention rate and a high interaction rate. So if you can keep people's attention for as long as possible, as close to 100% of the video, or 200%, meaning people watch it twice, you got a winner, baby. And actually, it's fascinating. In Tom Connor's interview I listened to, he kind of alludes to that, how there's a certain showmanship that's required when you want to engage people. But he was discussing it more so in a TV sense. But he also alluded to it when it came to things like spokespeople. So I wonder if he was trying to look for a sassy sort of city spokesperson. I wonder, do you think they'd ever hire you to be the city spokesperson?
Picture that.
But also, how many contracts does the city bid and chamber members have collectively and outstandingly with the subcontractors? So Charisse grabbed onto control of the farmers market accounts 3 years ago, and the farmers market overall. I did see on LinkedIn that she did get herself a farmers market management certificate for that. Is it not, I know it's a legally weighted word, so I won't use conflict, but I'll say, could it not be like an overextension of, or are they overextending themselves, having so many contracts at the same time? And if you look at what they're doing, this is a huge contract. They're acting like it's just a small supplement. They're promoting other projects. They're focusing on their other clients. So where's the accountability to make sure that us as taxpayers, if we're paying these people, even if they're not doing the best job ever, how can we make sure they're at least doing something? Because the main thing is, when I evaluated their contract and the work they've done so far, I can't really evaluate it because there's not much out there. They were supposed to put out at least 24 posts focused on tourism and messaging by November of 2024. So I was hoping also with my pressure that it would force them at the very least for us to get our money's worth, to get as many deliverables done in the next 4 months as they can. What are the procedures for preventing retaliation against professionals who call out the quality of these deliverables, like myself? So, yeah, getting back to Cherie, she threatened to sue me on Facebook, even though I didn't mention her name in the original post. I just called her a subcontractor. I linked the contract, and I also linked a summation of this very long report. And I said, well, I don't think you understand. I commented back to her, and I said, well, this is, these are taxpayer funds. They're liable for scrutiny. If you look at, I didn't say this, but it occurred to me, if you look at the other DRI projects, they all have some sort of independent oversight. You have the Peekskill Arts Alliance overseeing the arts projects of the DRI. You have all the city planners in City Hall overseeing like Fleischman's Pier and the other development, like property development grants and money dispersions like Pugsley Park. With marketing, you don't really have a pre-existing marketing committee like a bid but marketing board. You don't have a marketing expert in City Hall who can be like, oh, we're on month 8 and all of this stuff is missing.
Well, doesn't that fall on the city manager?
So with Matt Alexander, and it's actually Matt Rudikoff, who's as the Director of Economic Development. He's the one who's supposed to be overseeing all of the DRI grants. Matt Rudikoff has never used social media before. And then with Matt Alexander, he has mentioned that he has explored social media. He spent a little bit of time, but that does not marketer make. My other question, and I put in a FOIL request over 20 business days ago, meaning it's delinquent. I have not gotten a response in over 20 days. They're supposed to respond by 20 business days for the wayfinding contract. So this is part of the $500,000 from the DRI that's supposed to go to remarketing and branding Peekskill. And the wayfinding contract, I have to look up the name of the contractors, but it's supposed to be to create beautiful new signage for all over the city, directing tourists to certain areas, etc., which is a great idea. I'm curious as to why they didn't try to elicit more bids from local sign-making businesses, because they did go with this very, by underrated, I mean not many ratings available online, agency/company in North Carolina. So I'm curious as to if there's any oversight of that one at all. I'd love to have an answer to that as well. But from my estimation, about 1 out of 10 deliverables have been met on time per their timeline. And in my professional and subjective opinion, those that have been met have been mediocre and unremarkable. Have they accounted for each delay? Have they offered to repay the city? Yeah. In terms of, oh yes, they're supposed to be optimizing the social media platforms. And I had this conversation too with Matt Alexander, where he seemed confused about how to go about the municipal demands of city messaging. So, promoting upcoming events, announcements, press releases, things like that. And tourism sort of content. So I gave a bunch of links to cities that I felt like were doing a great job when it came to digital marketing and messaging. So take Asheville, for instance, North Carolina. They have, municipal assets, which are pretty banal, just standard updates and things like that just really residents need to see. And then they have separate tourism assets that showcase, the beauty and wonder of Asheville. And ideally, that's what the city of Peekskill should have. It should have I mean, it has, of course, Fred from Peekskill Exurbanist is absolutely amazing. He has done more for the city than, in my opinion, City Hall has done when it comes to a digital marketing presence. Because as a result, yes, when I was saying, when you look up Peekskill on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, you'll see, yes, sometimes my posts pop up in those search engine optimization, SEO, social media searches, but keyword searches. But you'll also see Fred's Peekskill Exurbanist, which is great, where he's doing mini vlogs, collaborations, and things like that with local businesses and really helping to put Peekskill on the map. And he's now been doing that for years, so I really commend him and his work. And he's also expanded into markets, giving folks opportunities for commerce. But you'll also see Peekskill problems. And then about 50 search results down, when you're looking up accounts with Peekskill in its name, you'll see the city of Peekskill at the bottom on Instagram. Because there is really, I'm highly doubtful, again, I'd love for them to publish their analytics, which they're not even really, they don't have sophisticated report backs as part of this contract. They are making the city pay $200 a month for Hootsuite, which is a social media management software that does include advanced analytics. That's why it's one of the most expensive of its type. And apparently, according to this, they're just submitting the Hootsuite automatic analytic reports. So there's no explanation as to, like, for instance, I anticipate the non-follower reach is very low. Are they going to explain why or what that is? No, they don't have to. They don't have to do anything. This is like, I hate to say it, but it's like the laziest contract I've ever seen, and I'm almost jealous of how lazy it is.
It's shameful. It makes me question what's going on with the rest of the DRI money. But as you said, there is oversight with all of these other projects, so the public need not worry that money is being spent that shouldn't be. As she said, there's oversight, except for particularly, it looks like this project. Sounds like a special pet project to me.
Yeah, and then in terms of optimization, social media optimization typically refers to making sure an asset is made for the correct platform, be it the native platform's tone, its desired aspect ratio. For instance, on Instagram, you famously have the Instagram square aspect ratio of 1:1. Or TikTok, you know, the 9:16 versus 16:9. So that's optimization, making sure you have all of those elements in mind when you're putting out something and you're creating things that will be the highest quality for that platform's particular audience. So in terms of optimization, which they're supposed to be doing, why aren't the creatives or graphics being adopted to make sure text isn't cut off on Instagram? They have the correct aspect ratio. The lighting is appropriate and text legible, logos legible, just very basic things. I hate to say it, it's just very amateur. You can tell that, you know, the city manager is kind of behind some of these posts. No offense to Matt Alexander, but it's not his thing. I said, will you schedule a post-mortem meeting and issue a report for and in November 2024 to dissect the over 100 ways the contract has not met its nebulous objectives? And did personal and/or political connections play any role in the Connors and these subcontractors obtaining their roles? Because I know for me, I can think of dozens of locals who are from Peekskill or have lived here a long time who would have done an amazing job as like the DEI officer for this grant, really connecting with all communities. Myself. It's really heartbreaking. Or again, also with the management of the municipal accounts and collecting content. So Mike Dardano lives in southern Westchester. The Connors don't live here. So according to what actually certain folks have told me, the Connors, they really don't care. That's what I've heard on the grapevine. They can go home and sleep well because they get their money. Meanwhile, here in Peekskill, we see the long lines outside of Fred's Food Pantry. We see the empty storefronts. We see businesses not being open or getting no foot traffic. And it's devastating. And that's why every time someone was like, Chloe, just sit back, don't do it, it's not worth the headache, I would be like, okay. And then I'd look outside at people struggling. People, you know, the local Peekskill Gourmet Deli, I noticed, has allowed some patrons to start creating tabs because they can't afford food there. I'm like, this is so unacceptable. That money could have been spent in such better ways. And I don't care because if you're a Democrat, Republican, leftist, conservative, what's wrong is wrong. And I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I didn't call this out. It's no personal vendetta against Charisse. She's unfortunately kind of made it about her. Like Absolutely. I mentioned in my post, I didn't mention her name. She identified herself. I responded. Then when I said, I was asking questions like, why aren't the deliverables being met, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, well, you'll still be hearing from my attorney, and, paraphrasing, well, I don't report to you. You're
a child or something, she said.
Yeah, well, that's what she said in person. So it's very similar along the lines of, like, your opinion doesn't matter. And I said, yes, well, you report to Matt Rudikoff and Matt Alexander, who have no marketing experience, and they can't properly provide you with oversight, clearly. But they ultimately report to the people of Peekskill. And because this is my community and I love it, I pray my fellow residents will see that, this objectively is not okay. So after that, Charisse, I don't believe she, oh yes, and I did say, if you want me to stop mentioning that you purchase followers, you can delete your fake followers, and I gave her instructions as to how to identify them and do that. She didn't respond to that, and then a few weeks later, one person was commenting on the Pugsley Park DRI grant, and that park was recently opened. I really loved the artwork there. But I know personally I miss having that shade, the trees, and I do, because I love the historical aspect of Peekskill. Just subjectively, I miss the more historical aspects. I think it's a little bit too modern for...
Absolutely.
For my taste, just my own personal aesthetics. But so people were commenting, like, who really pushed this through? Why, weren't residential sentiments listened to? It seems like a lot of money for just like a few hills and stuff, like $1 million+ or whatever on that. And I said, well... I've been left with such a bad taste in my mouth with this Wine Rubbing Connor grant, and that I wouldn't be surprised if there's some tomfoolery happening behind the scenes. And I directed them to my previous post, and then Charisse commented on that comment, and she goes, "Well, I spoke to my attorney, and she said it's not worth suing you or anything because it's too expensive or doing anything against you. She said that I should ignore you. You're just an immature troll, and just wait until I see you in person. You won't be such a cowardly troll behind a keyboard."
That's a middle school move right there.
Like,
she called you out. She wanted to meet you outside. How mature is that? How mature and professional is that for a DEI officer?
I think she forgot I already said all of this to her face back in April. But
how professional.
So after that, I got an email from a client of a year, and we had a great relationship, and I looked up to her more than a client, as an advisor and ultimately as a friend. And we had, filming plans for later this month. We had a content calendar prepared, and she writes in to me, "Oh, I'm so sorry to say, but I'm going in a different direction with social media. Can you send me the June invoice, and I'll pay it as soon as I can. I appreciate all the work you've done on our past endeavors together." And that was really upsetting. Of course, Charisse blocked me after that last comment. When I responded to her, sorry, I'm all over the place, with, yes, your lawyer said you can't do anything against me because it would be whistleblower retaliation. I'm just demanding more oversight. I'm trying to provide a community service here, and you keep making it about yourself. I'm trying to actually keep it focused on the main contractors, on the Connors, but because Charisse inserted herself, unfortunately, she kind of took the air out of the room, so to speak, and she made it about herself.
Yes.
And kind of it's ironic because she's kind of made this whole project about herself in a way. And I think there's a lack of humility, and I'm not going to try to throw stones at glass houses. I have my own personal flaws. But, the other folks on the dubious project advisory committee know me, and they were happy to, hear me out. She never has been. She is, except for a few occasions where once my local, name recognition was rising, she started approaching me in a very, overly friendly manner. And I felt like it was very inauthentic. And it also goes back to the irony that the Connors background is in traditional print marketing, because that doesn't need the authenticity. So when someone buys followers, the reason I have a problem with it is, if you go up to someone who doesn't know how to spot that or identify that, and you're like, look, I have 10,000 followers on this Instagram account, and you use it essentially as the term litmus test or a portfolio of sorts, then they'll be like, oh my God, 10,000 followers, you'll reproduce those results for me, I'll hire you. And they might, especially if they're older, they're not going to be able to realize that that is a vanity metric that was purchased for $100 from a bot farm in India. But beyond that, just the aspect of dishonesty, it shows that you lack authenticity. You can't get those numbers on your own, and you don't want to truly be, yourself. And it's ironic also that, Cherie just keeps being like, you're hiding behind a keyboard and you tell it to my face, blah, blah, blah. I'm real with people, I'm direct. If she was real and direct, including with herself, she would be like, why am I a part of this project that has so many issues? Why? I'm telling her she shouldn't be doing work she's not contracted to do. She's doing too much. I applaud her for the work she's done outside of her realm of expertise, but she should not have had to do it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I lost that one client, and it was really upsetting because that client stands for transparency and accountability, but she's very good friends personally with Cherise. Okay. So I feel like the lack of explanation, what was written between the lines was, if my friend says that I can't associate with you and her, I'm going to choose her over you. And she made it very clear when I was asking, because I still saw her as a mentor. When I was asking her advice on this, she made it very clear she didn't want to hear my side of the story at all. She didn't want to receive a copy of my report. She refused to look at the contract. And this is someone who I had done similar digging for a contract of someone she was looking into. And I got praise for doing, background checks on that and stuff. Mm-hmm. But and ironically, the issue was someone giving a governmental contract to their friends without full scrutiny. And what's been really upsetting is then when I suggest, there might be some impropriety, or at least some sketchiness with this one, with your friends, she's like, oh, I don't want to hear about it. And so it's kind of,
so basically, because you raised awareness about this contract, you're getting retaliation that you feel.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's unfortunate. The truth comes with retaliation. You do know that. And I feel bad for you because I don't want them. It's shame on these grown folks that would take your business and try to ruin you. Try to ruin your business for telling the truth, for doing what's right. Not because you had to, but because it's the right thing to do. And you must continue to do the right thing. I'm sure that the public appreciates your information on this DRI, particularly this project. But for me, I'd like for them to look at a couple of the other projects. I'd like to know why money went from Louis Lanza's great big scheme of a museum and a hotel to the Paramount. If Art thought these grants were grant specific, whatever you wrote down that you were doing and they granted you this grant, it was for that particular project. Is that not right?
Well, that's true, but what I've also found, I had a consult with an attorney who actually specializes in whistleblowing and whistleblower protections, and he disinclined to take my case. And what he said during the consult, with the disclaimer that he did not know all the details of my case just during the consult, but just hearing about it, he said the issue is when it comes to QTAM or QUITAM cases, whistleblowing fraudulent claims act cases, it's a lawyer coming in, and the term comes from like for the king or something, and it comes from archaic language where it's this idea of a peasant noticing malfeasance against the king and going after the perpetrator on behalf of the king. And in the United States, they've adopted that for local, municipal, and also state and federal governments. They have. So I asked him about it. He's like, yes, this does actually look like all the other QTAM cases, like for instance, the sketchiness with the business, the Weinreb and Connor business conveniently going from being co-founded by a male to all of a sudden being headed by Mary Connor, his wife, in time to get the New York woman-owned business certificate in order to submit a bid for this. Like, he said that's something he often sees in a lot of these. And he said it does look potentially promising, but the issue is, number one, you have to prove that the government was completely taken advantage of, and I guess they didn't know at all that fraud was happening, which I can't really say because I was blessed to do this. I mean, they obviously, when I was asked to do this, I'm assuming, or when they allowed me to do it, I'm assuming they thought that, yeah, I would just be offering some nondescript, tips, pointers, etc. I wouldn't go this in depth. And when they realized how in depth I was going and how bad it made them look, that's when they pulled back and made me radioactive and public enemy #1. So that's an issue. And then the other thing is, this attorney said that the attorneys get paid by commission. So they have to recoup the money that was given to the agency. And that is only $174,000 in this case. So that's not a big enough commission for him. So he suggested that I either go to a local reporter or I put this out publicly. So I went to a local reporter, and they said that they would look at it once the contract was up, and they couldn't use like the delays excuse, which, to protect their own liability and stuff, which is valid. I accepted that for a short bit, but then once I started seeing those posts on a local Facebook group about folks having to limit their business hours due to the lack of pedestrian foot traffic, I was like, I'm tired of this. And then once I also saw what Therese has started doing is she'll post something for like the farmers market, for the Bid Farmers Market on her Events to Remember page. She'll tag the farmers market as an Instagram collaborator, and she'll also tag the city as a collaborator. So she'll accept the request. So she'll use her private business to collaborate with the city and itself and the farmers market. Meanwhile, if I tag the city as a collaborator on like a Juneteenth photo or something, I will get no response. And then at worst, that content will be taken and reposted to the city's account without giving me credit. So, and then another client I lost because they're in a very fragile financial state, and even if they potentially sympathize with what I'm doing, they can't risk being seen as political because I'm seen as radioactive. So it's very upsetting because it would really only take, and then I had another client call me, and she was very upset with me for going public and kind of questioning the establishment. But I couldn't live with myself letting this go. And then also just I have no recourse. Like, what's my recourse? I'm supposed to complain to the DEI officer who's threatening to meet me in person in like a physically threatening way, and also threatening to sue me. Like, there's no recourse for me. I reach out, and I've already sent all this to City Hall. I didn't publish it until almost a full month went by after I sent it to leadership, or my initial thoughts to Matt Rudikoff and Matt Alexander, and then several weeks went by after I sent it to the City Council. And ironically, when I sent it to the City Council, I wrote, I'm just going to park this with you because I'm tired of it. I want it off my chest. I'm dealing with a lot of like guilt, believing that there might be malfeasance happening and no one's doing anything about it. Like, it's making me super anxious. I'm just going to send it to you. So it's like you're dealing with it. And I think I even said you don't have to respond if you don't want to, but I guess I wish they had responded and been like, thank you so much for doing all this work, and we'll look into it. Like, that one sentence would have been enough, because something needs to be done, because I can't live this way. It's damaging to my business. It's damaging to my clients' businesses. It's damaging to our city. And this is my home. I'm not leaving. Okay. And now I don't feel comfortable in business networking scenarios. Like, I don't feel comfortable going to the chamber or going to the Business Council of Westchester, because these subcontractors have such a large presence in both groups. I already had a situation a few weeks ago / months ago where Therese was complaining about me to a client, and it created a conflict with me and that client, who I respect immensely, who is truly one of my heroes in life. And I've dealt with a lot of depression in my life, and even substance abuse and stuff. I've overcome a lot of adversity. I've even gotten an award now from the city for Young Professional Leader from the Chamber of Commerce, which included a proclamation from the city. So also I published some of my findings after that, because I felt like it would lend me more credibility. Folks would take me more seriously, but it doesn't matter, because I don't have those connections that some people have fostered for 20 years. And it's frustrating, because I can put all this work in, I can promote Peak Skill so much and strategize all these cool collaborations, be it me wearing a inflatable latte costume, or cartwheeling around the city, or taking a video that about this strange house on Depew Street that has a house within its attic that got 500,000 views on Instagram and 5,000 views on TikTok. But it's like never enough for the city, because I don't have those connections, and therefore it's fine if my livelihood gets ruined. I mean, I'm finally in a good place like emotionally. And then for me to, I think that's what's been the most upsetting. When I try to do the right thing, that's when it's like I get killed for being the messenger.
Okay, well, don't stop doing the right thing. We've enjoyed hearing what's going on here. I'm sure that the people want to know more, and we will make sure that they know more. I appreciate you.
Well, and I want to encourage people. I guess we can link the Google form link. If you want to submit your thoughts anonymously about the city's marketing, I'd really appreciate it. Perhaps we can also include in the caption Matt Alexander and Matt Rudikoff's email, as well as like the city council's email. I know I also got Pete Harcum's office involved, State Senator Pete Harcum, who is reaching out to the city on my behalf because the retaliation has
Will they reach
bad.
out to the city? Have they told you they will reach out to the city?
Yeah, they said they would reach out,
Okay.
and I'm going to explore every avenue I have. I feel like, you know, I'm a registered Democrat, and I'm getting a lot of slack for going against, you know, our team in a way, like making our fellow Democrats in the city look bad and stuff. And so it's been disheartening, and I hope, you know, my fellow Democrats and my fellow residents understand that I'm not doing it to make anyone look bad. I'm doing it to make Peekskill better for everyone.
We appreciate it. And it doesn't matter your affiliation politically. The truth is the truth, no matter where it's coming from, as long as it's just the truth.
Exactly. But yeah, I guess what you can do in terms of action items out there is just, you know, if you want to reach out to me, we can also include a link to like my website or my email. And if you want to help, or if you want to reach out to Lee, I guess, create kind of like a coalition so that, you know, we can stop this. I never want this to happen again. My goal is I want to create like a marketing committee that's volunteer within the city of Peekskill. A bunch of residents. I don't even have to be on it if people are going to, you know, accuse me of taking it over or something.
No,
I just want to make sure it happens so that there has to be some sort of person in charge of oversight. Or they need to just take my report seriously, and then or hire someone else to look into it. Hire the enormous creative guys. Hire anyone else who's a local professional in this space to help me. And it you know, a lot of folks have been writing to me, and I'm really grateful to all of them, or telling me privately they really appreciate what I'm doing, and they're too afraid to go public themselves. That shouldn't be the culture. Like, that is disturbing to me. We have someone getting paid $200 an hour to make sure our voices are heard. We deserve to have our voice heard. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you.
I appreciate
That's a lot of
you.
information.